Just 1 second, then we'll be.
So just, oh, okay.
We're now live streaming.
Oh, there is, hello, Chris. Yeah, he's muted.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. Natalie's there as well. Welcome, Natalie. Then we have Michael and Sylvester. Welcome.
Love the aurora behind you, Solange.
Sorry?
Reflects your personality, the colors, the sky behind you.
Right.
Green energy everywhere.
Yes.
We're now live on Facebook, so I'm going to mute myself. Solange, is over to you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me just put this here. So I guess we are ready to start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining this networking session on circular economy. I'm very honored to be allowed to moderate this session, and I hope you're going to take really a lot of value from it. My name is Solange Blaszkowski. I work for Philips in the Netherlands, and I'm the chair of IEC, the Advisory Committee on Environmental Aspects of IEC. And I'm also the convener of Working Group 5, working on a method to assess the proportion of reused components. I'm talking to you now from Eindhoven, and the way we set up this session is that I'm going to start with a short, hopefully short presentation on a little bit on introduction and on the basics of circular economy. And then later on, we go into the questions and the discussion that is promised for this networking session. So, as you know, the population is increasing dramatically and will continue doing so for the next decades. Although exist huge inequalities amongst the regions, in average, the economic power of the population is increasing when compared to the time of our grandparents. This results in an increase of the well-being of the population, but it has also a negative effect, like the ability to own more assets and also even the consumerism increasing. Altogether, this is resulting in a tremendous growth in waste production, but also in order to fulfill the demand for this growing population, we need materials, we need resources. As a result, we see more and more depletion of natural resources. Just to show a few figures, over 53 tons of electronic waste were produced last year. And over 75% of the surface of the earth shows sign of depletion today. And this is the very sad things we need to deal with, and we need to do something about it. And a way for it to do it, to accomplish it is through circular economy. The concept of circularity will allow us to make the transition to a more green economy. So what is circular economy? Circular economy is described as a systemic approach to the design of products and process and business models by making the flow of materials more circular and reducing and ultimately eliminating waste, and so allowing for the sustainable economic growth. Circular economy will be fundamental in allowing for decoupling of economic development from environmental degradation while promoting health and well-being. Circular economy is based on three principles of reducing and eliminating waste and pollution through intelligent designs, through keeping products and materials in use, and regeneration and growth of natural resources. Its ultimate objective is reaching sustainable economic growth while retaining value at the circular economy. Circular economy distinguishes between biological and technical cycles. Biological cycles refer to the management flow of renewable assets, while the technical cycles refer to the management flow of feedstock used, for example, in industrial and production process. Technical cycles are the most relevant for IEC. I don't mean we don't do anything on the biological cycles, but mostly we focus on the technical ones. So this slide shows the building blocks of the circular economy. I hope it will answer a question, a number of questions from the audience, like, for example, which are the most important actions for you to realize a circular economy? And also, how can the necessary changes to the global financial system be made to make a circular economy more profitable for companies than a linear one? So being or becoming circular starts with the business model. The shift to a circular economy requires innovative ways to do business that either replace existing ones or opens the door for complete new opportunities. For example, pay for reuse, renting, leasing, you name it. The manufacturer will offer the service while reducing the operational costs. While marketing defines feasible business models requirements, system architects and engineers will design the products within such constraints. Engineers need to understand what circular economy is in order to be able to deliver it. For example, reuse of components across a range of products only works if products and components are designed for reuse. The use, for example, of standardized parts is key, and the products must be easily disassembled. Improving the design of products without a business model behind to justify it would make the products very expensive. So to realize a circular economy, incremental changes are not the solution. They are possible, and people are doing that all the time. But on a longer term, we will need to go to a bigger transformation. And the business models linked to innovation will be really necessary. The circularity can be enabled by the supply chain. The reuse of products, components, modules requires organized return flows for those parts. So closing up material loops make parts reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, and materials recycling possible. Well, last but not least, there are always tension between closing the circle with policies, with regulations, but also with consumer behavior. For instance, reuse is not always easy. Some countries do not allow for sales of refurbished systems, for example. Some others don't allow for the take back of products. So consumers, on the other hand, have the perception that a second-hand product has poor quality, or they are not fitting with their image, and they prefer to buy a new one. So in order to close the circle and allow for reuse of materials to become commonplace, market mechanisms like incentives, like education, like leading by example, but also agreements, cooperations between countries will need to be put in place in the future. So circular economy is a very broad and complex concept, and involves many aspects that are not directly in the scope of the IEC standards, like socio-economic aspects, regeneration of natural resources, and biological and living systems that are distinguished, for example, in the biological cycles, but also the circularity considerations on the macro level, at regions, at countries. So resource efficiency expresses how natural resources can be used to deliver sustainable development while minimizing the environmental impacts. In other words, Resource efficiency means ensuring that sufficient water, air, oil, minerals, and other resources are available for delivering well-being to a world population of 10 billion in 2050, while maintaining the quality of the environment, preventing climate change, and reducing loss of biodiversity. So resource efficiency is part of the circular economy, and it contains aspects such as energy and material efficiency. Although it takes in the environment aspects into account, it does not distinguish between the linear and the circular economy. So doing resource efficiency or material efficiency or energy efficiency only will not solve the issue. That's why we have circular economy. But resource efficiency is a way for IEC to improve its products, to make it suitable for a circular economy. Material efficiency expresses how efficiently materials can be used to deliver a function, for example, through a good or through a service, and the extent to which they can be kept in use and not discarded. If after their use products are incinerated or discarded in landfill, there is a significant loss in value associated with that material. As such, we can attribute very low efficiency in the use of such product. So material efficiency refers mostly to the technical cycles of the circular economy. The ultimate objective of the material efficiency is to keep materials in use forever, either through lifetime extension strategies or through recycling. For many years, the focus of, for example, legislation has been to improve the energy usage, the energy efficiency of EE products. With the increased demand on the use of materials, and the imminent scarcity of natural resources, the focus is now being extended to the material usage and its preservation. So last but not least, I want to clarify that although there is a strong focus on material efficiency today, we cannot see it as a separate entity. I said this already and I repeat, it cannot be optimized isolated from other aspects that are applicable to products, like for example, the energy efficiency, the safety, EMC, and so on. You really need to optimize all these things side by side in order to have the best result, and what we call the trade-offs. In the previous slide, I explained that material efficiency expresses how efficiently materials can be used to deliver a function and how they should be optimized to remain used, if not indefinitely, at least for as many cycles as possible. Here, the use and waste hierarchy is shown, with aspects to be strongly promoted or avoided when designing the use and using the product's parts and materials. Highest in this diagram are strategies associated with longer product life while using less natural resources. So consume less resources to make products and design products able to live much longer than they do today. Next in the hierarchy takes extension of lifetime of products as strategy. So reused is preferred over repair, that is preferred over, for example, refurbishing. This is because the further we go in changing the product, the increased amount of energy and resources that are necessary to accomplish it, and more value in the economy is lost. So, for example, repairs involves a simple action of maybe replacing one small part, while refurbishing or remanufacturing involves many other actions like repair, like cleaning, like returning aesthetics, but also later on sales, delivery, installation. So that all costs a lot of more resources and demands a lot more from the product than a simple repair. And that's why it's lower in this strategy. So let's now go into the waste phase of the graph. For many people, circular economy equals recycling. So a lot of people think that circular economy is about recycling. Well, it is also about recycling, but as you see in the graph, recycling is very close to the red zone with aspects to avoid. So, and this is because of the significant losses in the value of the product, of the materials that are composing the product when it reaches this point. Although it's important that products and parts can be recycled, and you will do that because it is really necessary, this should be always the last resort. You should do that only after all the other lifetime extension strategies have been already applied. So new resources, energy, water, chemical substances, they're all necessary to perform the recycling. And then even more energy is necessary to make the new product from the recycled material. So you see how much value is lost when you reach the recycling. So that is why we say that recycling is the worst of the good, and it should be applied as a last resort. When a material can no longer be recycled, at least its energy should be recovered, and landfill should be really avoided. So these are aspects that should be dealt with by IEC standards. I'll go briefly through them. Products will be, so what is the likely trend we are going to have in the future? Products are likely to be are required to last longer. That this is the basics of the circular economy. So what are the implications for example, the safety of products, to their performance, reliability, software update? If products live much longer, all those things foreseen? Products will be required to be reused once, twice, multiple times. Is the data removal and the security guaranteed in your standards? Legislation will require increased reuse of, for example, used parts. In the future, new products will contain used parts. We can foresee a moment where there will not be 100% new product on the market. They all will contain used parts. How we are going to deal with those new requirements in our IEC standards? Legislation will demand more and easier product repair. What are the minimum requirements, for example, for parts reliability? Are tests needed available for repaired products? And last, legislation will require increased recycled content. Are there new ways for guaranteeing compliance, safety, and performance of products containing high amounts of recycled material? And then I'm not talking about metals, because it's easy to recycle metals. I'm really talking about plastics. So those things will need to be considered and improved and taken into account in our standards. Well, a number of people from the audience asked about the status of circular economy and material efficient standardization. So here is a slide showing the IEC status. IEC is mostly focusing on material efficiency. There are horizontal and product-specific standards already published or under development. Those are in orange in my slide. So a lot of people were asking about it, I have included it in the presentation, and I'm not going to read them through, but we are going to make this presentation available for you after this session. So this is my last slide. Here I show the international landscape of circular economy and material efficiency standardization. In particular in Europe, Europe is at the far front with a large number of standards covering mainly material efficiency. There are also a number of questions for an audience about, for example, legislation. In Europe, following the publication of the second Circular Economy Action Plan, we can expect a considerable number of legislations to appear, but also existing legislations will be broadened, like, for example, the Eco Design Directive, which will include new types of products. At international level, a few isolated countries are active, such as Japan, for example, is putting a lot of effort on recycling, but also countries like Brazil and few other countries in Latin America. And there was also a question from the audience. These countries are very active in the circular economy standardization front, in particular within ISO. Although we did not see yet legislation requirements there, I believe it's just a matter of time. So with this, I conclude my presentation and I'm going to stop sharing this. Now I want to open the discussion. And for that, I want to invite my panel. I want to introduce to you my panel of today. So I see that now quite a lot more people have joined this networking session. So I want to I want to introduce to you Jens Giegering, talking to you from Wuppertal in Germany. We have also Claudia Kustenzer talking to you from just outside Berlin. It should be London, but it's now Berlin. And we have outrageous time for Walter Jaeger, that will be talking to us from Ottawa in Canada. We have Vimal Mahendru from India. And I miss one, and that's Richard. Richard Hughes, are you there, Richard?
Richard is having problems with a local login on Zoom, so he's trying to connect.
I see. So I hope he was going to be able to join us soon. So before we enter in an open discussion amongst each other, let me make an interesting, a few questions to this group of experts that I in particular invited to this session. So let me start with Jens. Hello, Jens.
Hello.
Welcome. So Jens works for Vorwerk in Germany, and that is household appliances, vacuum cleaning, producing appliances, and some other things. Jens is very active in a variety of standardization activities at national, European, but also international level. In particular TC 59, household appliances, but also JTC 10 on material efficiency standardization in Europe. Jens has a background in chemistry and a PhD in physical chemistry. So it's a very smart guy. So let's really listen to him. Jens, you are very active in the household appliances world. I was thinking, because of the circular economy will change the way we do business today, what do you expect will happen with household appliances in the future? We will still have the situation we have today, that we own the appliances and we use a number of years and then we throw them away? Or do you expect these things to change? Is there any expected trend to think of?
So coming just from the business model, to tell you a little bit about this, what we see is that there are more and more appliances that are out for renting. So a pay per use or pay per month business case. And I expect this to increase more and more in the future. There are different market actors actually interested in this. So there are manufacturers pushing for a more of a leasing, a renting model. But we also see that typical trade businesses like the electronic markets, where you would typically buy household appliances, are stepping into this and I expect this to rise in the future, as you already mentioned in your great presentation there, that these appliances will be designed in the future to be more durable, so they will be used for a longer time, meaning that it will take longer until they break down, and if they break down, you can easily or more easily repair them. Which of course a product that can be repaired and can then be used or reused again makes it more interesting to cover these kind of rental business models. However, I think we should be realistic that this will probably not cover all of the products. So if you have very small, cheap household appliances like, I don't know, a kettle, an electric kettle, then probably a renting model, I can't see that to be viable or economic for neither the manufacturer nor for the end user. I mean, if you can buy this kind of product for a very cheap price, then probably there's not much incentive to rent it for some part of it. But I definitely see this happening already for larger household appliances, like, for example, washing machines. There are manufacturers providing this rental business model already in the Benelux, so Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. So I expect this to increase. So yeah.
And are the users, the consumers, are they ready for it? Because I heard somewhere that, for example, in Germany, it's very difficult to let people to use leased products, for example, while in other countries this is possible. So how we are going to make that transition through to the users, the consumers?
That's a very good question, actually. I mean, in some other industries, it's common practice. For example, car rentals or car leasing is very widespread. So there could be an incentive from regulators to have some sort of reduced tax on this, which would incentivize. I mean, you know, the wallet of the user is very sacred. So that could be one way, and the other way I would see is just to do lots of marketing and PR on this, to really explain people that there is a way you do not have to own your product. You have certain benefits in not owning the product, and this, depending on the region, this has been common practice. I mean, when you are in densely populated regions, these how you call them, washing salons, so where you can go and wash your clothes and just pay for use. They are already there, and maybe people need to be reminded that this exists. And also for the German part, I mean, a few decades ago, it was common practice that in a house with multiple families living in that house, they had one big washing machine in the cellar, so they were all using it. And this has been the case, so why can't we make it happen again? I mean, probably it needs lots of convincing and probably a very convincing commercial to do this, but I think it's possible, yeah.
Okay, many thanks, Jens. And let's now go to the next panelist of today. I want to invite Walter Jaeger. So Walter is talking to us, and I said already, from Ottawa in Canada. He is the principal consultant for ACD compliance, where he's supported manufacturers and solution providers in developing product compliance solutions to global environmental regulations, eco-labels, and standard representation. So Walter has contributed to the development of several environmental standards around material declaration, compliance documentation, eco-label requirements, eco-design, carbon footprint, material circularity, but also circular economy. So he's really a very knowledgeable person. He has been a member and active contributor to the IEC TC 111 on the environmental standardization since 2005, where he currently leads the advisory group on standardization business plan. Walter holds a master's degree in electrical engineering and in business administration. So, Walter, welcome.
Thank you, Solange.
So, Walter, you are a very knowledgeable expert on data management. We see today with the COVID-19 that all the decisions, they're dependent on data, availability of data, transfer of the data, reliability of the data. Circular economy is not going to be different. SDGs, and then I look to Vimal, in order to show the progress of the SDGs, we need to have data. And for half of it, we have no data available or no data that can be compared. So Walter, tells me, please, what is your view on data management around the circular economy? Circular economy will ask a huge amount of data, circularity assessment. I mean, you're very active in ISO developing the circularity assessment standard, and you have already identified over 100 indicators to assess circularity. So how will data evolve in a circular economy, Walter, please?
That's a really good question, Solange. Really to try and understand circularity, and going back to that those slides that you presented at the beginning there's a lot of information that's needed to really try and understand what level of circularity has been implemented on specific products or services. And the electrotechnical industry is particularly challenged because we have such a complex and deep supply chain. And when we're dealing with products, it's not just a product with a few different materials associated with it. We've got hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of components and materials in products. And how to track all of that with regard to rolling up the level of circularity that has been put into a product is a significant challenge. In order to be able to do this, you really need good information flowing down through your supply chain. And I think we need to take a look at data. If you're looking at it from a manufacturer's perspective or a user's perspective, there's really data going both upstream and downstream from there. And we really need to be able to roll up all of that data. We definitely have some of the regulators coming into play with regard to the downstream data, with regard to manufacturers providing data to users, and then also making data available to potentially waste operators as well with regard to reuse, probably more so from a recycling perspective than a reuse perspective at this point in time. The European activity around the SCIP database, I think, is one big example of a regulation that's coming into play to try and move that along. But getting information from the supply chain has been particularly challenging. Over the last 10 to 20 years, systems have been put in place to start to have more of that data flow downstream through the supply chain, through the manufacturing chain there, with regard to what substances are in there, particularly regulated substances. We now have more of a push going on with regard to entire sort of full substance declarations or full material declarations on information coming down. To make that effective, though, particularly given the large number of suppliers and different materials of a number of those components that we have in play in electrical technical products, we need to have standards that enable a common language to be used between the supplier and their downstream customer in order to communicate that information. If we don't have that kind of standardization, it is a huge effort to try and put that information together. We're going to, and over the last 10, 20 years now, with material declarations emerging, and we've got some standards within IEC TC 111 focused on material declaration, and now there's initiative to expand that into the ISO world as far as having a dual logo standard as well. I don't know if you're talking about that later on, Solange, or not, but in order to be able to, and efficiency is going to be a key matter here as well. You need to have the supply chain, and often a supply chain supports many different industries. So it's very important to have those standards so that there's a common method to disclose that information. And since some of these supply chains support many different industries, electrotechnical industry, different sectors within the electrical technical industry, and other industries as well, that level of efficiency and passing that information down is vital. But now we've got other factors that are coming in related to circular economy as well, not just the regulations associated with hazardous substances. You've got topics like, what's the level of post-consumer recycled material in a piece of plastic, right? And you've got a lot of different parts that might be in a product. That information needs to be passed down, and there's no easy way of doing it right now. Short of, say, putting it, for example, into data sheets associated with components or with materials, but that's an extremely labor-intensive mechanism that's not going to drive the type of efficiency that's needed in order to help bring costs down for implementing a circular economy. And we need to have standardized mechanisms associated with that. We've also got one area that's popular. I do quite a bit of work in the eco-label area with regard to various types of environmental products. And one emerging area that's been coming up is closed loop recycled materials, where rather than downcycling plastics, for example, you're using the plastics from a given class of products or even that manufacturer's products and collecting that in, recycling it for use in at the same type of products going forward. And that requires a lot of information flow in order to ensure that you have the credibility associated with maintaining that flow of materials. And looking at things like recycled content, et cetera, it's possible to communicate that down, whether we're dealing with recycled metals, and many of the metals are already very heavily recycled, but currently there's no mechanism to really be able to track the amount of recycled content that's in there. Whenever this discussion topic has come up in eco-label standards, it's always been a matter, oh, it's heavily recycled, but we have no mechanism to track it. And plastics are a significant challenge. There's a number of other materials that may need to be tracked as well. We need standardized mechanisms to be able to, along with the substances that are in the product, but also the level of recycled content in there, the designation with regard to critical raw materials that are in there, so that that information can then flow in part down through the supply chain, so the finished product manufacturer can properly roll up the status of what's the level of circularity here. And we already know and have heard that there are trade-offs in how you implement circularity. You can't always, you can't have five.
Yeah, talking about trade-offs, we have now here a question from Mark Allen. So how do you see the future with regard to measurement, reporting, and targets for circularity? What sort of metrics and also trade-offs do you think we'll use on a product or company basis? So
yeah, I saw that. I saw that question in there. That's a really good question, and I think that's becoming a significant question that a number of people and a number of organizations are trying to tackle right now. Within IEC, we're definitely looking at data to try and support that within the electrotechnical sector. One of the ISO standards that you had identified in your slides, Solange, in ISO TC 323 on circular economy, is focused specifically on measuring circularity. And I've had the pleasure of being very involved in that activity. And one of the things I have found is there are a lot of different opinions out there. There are a lot of different passionate opinions, making it a challenge to try and come up with a common accountable method to measure circularity. But there is progress towards that with regard to what indicators are most relevant. How do the different indicators trade off with each other? Because you can't always just implement one method and implement another method and have the two not potentially conflict. You need to take a look at it from a holistic perspective on how does this actually play out as far as the overall net impact on the environment, on social, anything else that might be relevant to it. And to do that, you really need to have that proper primary data coming up through the supply chain. So that's one of the things that we're coming across as well in measuring circularity, is how to have that data from the supply chain that can be properly assessed then to determine what are the benefits. What's being done, what are the benefits?
Many thanks, many thanks. Let's go further. Let's move to the next one. And I want to invite Claudia. So this data will be a challenge, but another challenge we're going to have is waste. And Claudia Kustenzer is an environmental professional with 20 years experience in sustainable waste and resource management. So I believe Claudia is going to be able to tell us a lot about waste management. Claudia has worked for different NGOs, and currently she's working for ECOS, an European NGO organization, actually a worldwide environmental organization, the only one focusing on sustainability and standardization. So Claudia, you are a waste expert, and as you have, I mean, people have seen in my presentation in the beginning, waste is becoming a challenge, a huge challenge. Electronics waste, the amount of electronics waste being produced is really outrageous. So how are you going to solve the issue of waste in order to become a circular economy? And how can we do that? Perhaps through standardization. So what are the aspects that should be covered or not? What should we change in the economy to solve the issue of waste? And then once we are there, do we need to have any standards on waste? Because in theory, we will not have any waste anymore, right? So well, Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you also for the great presentation, and I was very, very happy to see the waste hierarchy featuring so strongly in there. I remember only just 10 years ago when environmental organizations were fighting to actually have the waste hierarchy, or the idea of the waste hierarchy, included in the Waste Framework Directive at EU level. So it's good to see that this has now become a standard tool to think about well, reducing environmental impacts from resource use. So I would say really to take a step back in terms of thinking about, well, you say I'm a waste management professional, but actually we've always, the organization I used to work for, WasteWatch, we always talked about resource management, because ultimately we want to see society, or want society to look at waste as a resource, not as waste. Of course, we will still have some waste to deal with, but as you say, the ultimate aim is to actually ensure we have as little waste as possible. And in terms of the sort of role that standards the role that standards have been playing or can play in this context, I mean, we've seen a lot of standards related to implementing the waste hierarchy at very practical level, being developed for the EU as part of the material efficiency standardization request. I think you have been involved in this as well, you mentioned. So there are actually now standards that have been published very recently that provide tools where we can actually assess according to the waste hierarchy. We're first talking about durability, then we're talking about in those standards what makes a product possible to repair, reuse and upgrade, And then we also have a standard on recoverability and recyclability. And then further down the chain, we're also looking at component reuse, so very specific things. And then also to close the loop, as we just heard, I mean, one of the critical things is actually how to also bring these recovered materials or components back into products. So there's also a standard on assessing recycled content, for example. And then specifically talking about IEC standards, we're currently working, well, starting off from Sensenelec, but this is hopefully going to be an IEC initiative, a global standard for the sustainable management of e-waste, electronic waste. And I think this could have a very great impact and potential. And I think one of the ways we're trying to frame this particular standard is also that it actually looks at the waste hierarchy. It brings in reuse and all the management options for e-waste, and also makes the link to product design. So actually we can have greater durability, extend product life. But something I did want to say also, and it links very nicely to Walter's discussion just now, discussion about data, because I think one of the issues we haven't touched on is resource circularity in itself or per se is not necessarily sustainable, because of course we have to have a very strong link to actual sustainability goals, because of course you could have one company that manages to bring all its the majority of its materials back into the production cycle, but we haven't actually looked at this stage at the absolute impacts in terms of both resource productivity, but also other environmental impacts like greenhouse gas emissions.
The trade-offs.
Well, I wouldn't call them trade-offs. I think as from an environmental perspective, because obviously I'm a sustainability or environmental professional, we're kind of starting off with the objectives. So I think we have to have very clear sustainability outcomes in mind, and then make that link to the design of business models. So the design is not just focusing on economic issues, but it's also potentially looking at health and safety. So health and safety in terms of the human health, but also the planetary health, so environmental health. So for example, one issue with waste from energy, energy from waste, an article in The Guardian that I read just this morning is environmental groups in the UK, for example, are campaigning for the reduction of energy from waste, because plastics, the incineration of plastics while generating energy has also a massive impact on greenhouse gas emissions, and potentially would prevent the UK from reaching its carbon neutrality by 2050. So there are even sort of sub aspects that we need to look at. Even when we're talking about the waste hierarchy, we need to think about other impacts. It's not just about the resource productivity, and also hazardous chemicals. And I mean, the standard I just mentioned, the proposed e-waste, sustainable e-waste management standard. One of the critical things there as well is to prevent other emissions and pollution occurring in recycling processes, for example, and also recycling effectiveness, whereby we actually make sure we recycle and recover the majority of materials. You mentioned plastics there, for example. So we're not just trying to recover the most valuable materials, but we're looking at doing something useful with all of those materials. And that's a very, very big challenge at the moment.
Fantastic. So seeing waste as a resource, that's the way forward, right?
And also the total impacts. Walter mentioned it, we need to kind of look at the macro level in terms of sustainability. We need to actually look at the macro level of resource productivity and other environmental impacts to really achieve sustainability of the circular economy.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Claudia. So we have one question now that was raised by Vimal. So how can we stop, no, it's not this one. How to embed circular economy as a way of thinking and working across all humanity. Vimal, based on the presentation we gave in the beginning and based on the very interesting discussions we had until now, what would be your conclusion? How you would proclaim circular economy through the world and say, guys, you need to stick to circular economy. That's the solution for our future.
Thank you very much for this question, Solange. Actually, I'm part of this. In my regular work, for those who may not be familiar with me, I come from India and I come from relatively humble background. I've grown up in India. And when I was a kid, I could see every day my mom, whatever we bought in the house was repurposed or reused. I'm sure many of you can relate to this. Not even a brown paper bag was thrown away. In India, we were always short on resources. We are even today short on resources. We have a huge population. And as a country, we have no choice but to go for recycling and repurposing and reusing stuff. Somewhere, my fear is that as a global community, we are getting away from that. Somewhere, the global affluence that we are used to today, we believe it's sexy to buy the latest, the best, it could be an iPhone, the car, or whatever else, or the latest in thing that we need to get into. I think we need to get away from that. My feeling is, and to me, this is also the business case of why we should look at circular economy and embed it into standards. I want to make 3 quick points. One, I think increasingly businesses are trying to differentiate from the rest of them. As there is overcapacity of almost everything in the world, how do we differentiate? And the differentiation, which I think we are already beginning to see in our societies, getting away from a focus on shareholder value to stakeholder value. A young teenager anywhere in the world today, how do we leave a better world for that person? And how do we make sure that we listen to that voice? If I were to listen only to the shareholders, there is a different set of direction that I would be taking. But I think global CEOs have realized that now more than ever, looking at stakeholder value and creating stakeholder value is going to be rewarded, not only by the stock markets, but by society itself. So I see this shift already taking place. And the European Green Deal is a perfect example how corporates within Europe and rest of the world are looking at it. And it is not just about the fully developed countries. I see in India also this kind of change taking place. The second aspect of this is regulatory. Whether we like it or not, I saw a question on regulations in the chat. Whether we like it or not, the world is changing and the regulators are increasingly putting a stake in the ground. If you look at SDGs, which was more a statement coming out of policymakers and political leaders of 196 countries, they put a stake in the ground and said, we promise this to all the people. Now, do you think the industry or any other segment of our society can ignore that? God forbid. Of course, we cannot ignore that. And so we will have to follow. So whether we like it or not, regulators are coming in, regulations are coming in, and they will insist on some form of circular economy being embedded into standardization. The good thing is IEC is focused on this, and thanks to the work of Solange and several leaders within the IEC community that we are working on this. The third, and perhaps to me the most emphatic point, I inherited a world where there was less pollution. When I grew up, I could drink water from anywhere in the country, from a stream, from a pond, from a lake, anywhere. Today, why is it that I have to drink water out of a bottle? Can I take us back to that world where my grandchildren can again drink water from anywhere in the world, be it a pond, a lake, a river, or any place, and feel absolutely safe? To me, the most compelling argument is we did inherit a great world. Somewhere during our lifetime, unwittingly, we have created all kinds of challenges for ourselves. But we have also an opportunity and a calling to create a better world for the grandchildren and the coming generations. To me, this is the reason why I think that we need to focus on circular economy across all standardization. Thanks, Solange.
Great words, Vimal. Really very inspiring. Many thanks for you to be here and share with us your thoughts. So let's now go into the questions. We handled some of them already. We got one question about lean. So how can we establish the relation between the concept of circular economy and the notion of Lean Six Sigma as applied to processes and production tool? So perhaps I'll try to answer that, and if any of you want to say anything more about it, you are totally welcome. So Lean is based on the customer demand and developing high quality products and services in the most effective and economic way. So the lean thinking and the circular economy have one thing in common, and that is both want to or aim at eliminating waste, but their approach is different and they look from different perspectives. While lean focuses on removing anything that does not add value to the customer, circular economy will be about the rethinking and optimizing how resources are managed to create value, but in a much broader sense, in a much broader way. So I don't know if I answered your question well, but I hope that that clarifies a little bit the link and circular economy. Anyone else that would like to say a few words about this topic?
Maybe one comment from my side, Solange.
Please go ahead, Jens.
If you, from your explanation, if you put the circular economy thinking into the heart of the customer's interest, then you have a perfect match of lean and circular economy.
Perfect conclusion. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's go now into a question from producer. It's a question for you, I think, Jens. What will be the role of the producer of the product in ensuring that the end user is incentivized to get the product back to the source? So how to get the product back? So
yeah, well, I mean that well, I can see a few things that you could do as a producer. If you are going for a leasing renting model, it shouldn't be any problem, because you, as a producer, you still own the product. So that's the easy answer. The more difficult answer is if you're going for a traditional make and sell approach, then you can still incentivize by organizing some sort of take back scheme and incentivizing with, for example, vouchers for a new product of your company or something like that. So to give some sort of incentive to the customer. As I stated before, the wallet is sacred. So maybe that would be the easiest way to incentivizing this. I remember that I have seen for some not household products, for something different. If you take back these also electrical products to the manufacturer, if you give it to their sort of recycling activities, then they at least promise to, well, that is all handled safely and reasonably, of course, and also they promise to plant trees. So for every whatever it was, you take it back and you basically made a tree bloom at some point in the future. So I mean, there are different things depending probably on which kind of product it is, and well, sort of the emotions you want to strike with the customers. that you want to nudge into getting back these kind of products. However, there has to be said that there are already, depending on the region in the world you're living, of course, there are some sort of take back schemes. I mean, in Europe, there's these WEEE schemes, and many other countries in the world also have this kind of idea of collecting electrical and electronic products and sort of giving them to the correct recycling flows. So maybe it would also be a good idea to incentivize this more. And there are already discussions, not from the production side, but from the regulation side, to have some sort of eco-modulation on some fees that you have to pay as producer. So yeah, that there's a lot of activities going on there.
Fantastic. So in view of time, I will try to answer one last question, and that's from the chat. So how do we keep people consuming goods without consuming resources and degrading the earth? I would say by doing circular economy. So circular economy, at the core of circular economy, is the decoupling between the resources, the economic aspects, and the impacts. Once you decouple them and you maintain the resources in the economy, so you can keep using them without decreasing the value, you're going to achieve that exactly question you're stating. So you're going to achieve sustainable development while still being able to have all the comfort and the well-being that we are used to, that we need. So any last comment? Anyone want to make any comment, to bring anything?
I have a quick point, Solange, with your permission. To the earlier point on what can the manufacturers or producers do, one thing which I've seen in India and perhaps in some other countries is that the industry associations come together who on voluntary basis set up a system for collecting. That has worked very well in a country like India, and especially those countries where the government regulatory mechanisms may not be as robust as you want them to be. Maybe this is not relevant in Europe, I don't know, but in India, this works very well. And I've seen this in some other countries. On coming to your point regarding, what any last word, my personal last word is on this thing. I think we really don't have a choice.
We need to do it.
And I take a more philosophical view of this thing. Money in my pocket, where I can afford, let's say, the best phone in the world and the best car and the best whatever, does it give me the permission to go and degrade Earth? If it is a phone, then money in my pocket gives me the right to use the benefits from it, not spoil the world. So I think we have to differentiate between when we have money and affluence around us, what right do we have? Our right is to use that resource for the time we are on planet Earth, but it doesn't give us any right to degrade things, period.
It means that we do have a lot of duties, and certainly the duty to solve the issue. So guys, many thanks for you all joining. Walter, for your 5 o'clock in the morning call. Really thanks for you to be here. Claudia, Jens, Vimal, and all the others, Chris, Dirk. I see a lot of known faces, Jos. So many thanks for you for all of you being here and making this a great success. So
thank you, Solange. Thanks to you.
Everyone.
Thank you.